You've tuned into Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes. Your access to success strategies and more to help you move onward and upward with your life. Listen in each week as she interviews others who have really taken their essence to the next level and truly unpaused their life. Now here's your host, Dr. Callie Estes.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Dr. Callie Estes, and I am founder of the Addictions Academy, the Addictions Coach, and Rehab Rescue. Welcome to Unpause Your Life. This is a great podcast where we showcase people who have done something extraordinary with their life. I welcome you, and I hope you enjoy all of our guests.
On my way, found a reason to wake up another day.
You are listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes, the Addictions Coach and the Addictions Academy. Very excited for my guest today. Dr. Valerie Mason-John is the award-winning author of 8 books, including 8-Step Recovery, Using the Buddha's Teachings to Overcome Addiction, and there are 8-step recovery meetings in several continents. She's the author of Detox Your Heart, Meditations for Emotional Trauma. In 2005, she co-founded the 8-week course, Mindfulness-Based Addiction Recovery, known as MBAR. This is either a 4-week intensive course online or a 2 hours a week for 8 weeks in-person course for anybody wanting to enhance their recovery. There is a train-the-trainer component for those who would like to be facilitators of this course. Mason-John works as an inspirational public speaker on the field of mindfulness approaches for addiction and is a master trainer in conflict transformation and leadership skills. She is also an accredited mindfulness teacher and life coach. Welcome, Dr. Valerie.
Hi, Callie.
This is going to be a fun day. So, welcome to the show. Our listeners love to hear about you and what you're doing, personal and professional. So give us an overview. What are you working on currently? And what are you up to?
Well, currently I've come across the Recovery Academy through one of your great master trainers, Andre Viel, who actually was on my course, and I trained him, and he came out to Thailand with me, and I was just so inspired with him. I just thought, you know what, I need to do this recovery coaching and get myself accredited and get my partner accredited. And that's been really great, actually. It definitely has really enhanced my practice and made me look at recovery and addiction in a different way. I mean, it's just proof that you can always keep on learning. There's just more to learn.
So prior to getting into the addiction side, I believe you've done some work with Gabor Mate and some mindfulness stuff. Tell us about that.
Yeah, actually, I basically, Gabor is a teacher, is one of my teachers and a friend. And Gabor came into my life because I wrote 8-Step Recovery, and I asked him to write the foreword to the book. Oh, and nice. He just generously said yes. He didn't even know me at that point. I kind of, emailed him through the website and just thought, he's an immigrant. He's going to support me being an immigrant. And I didn't even really know a lot about his work then. And I just really began to familiarize myself with his work. And what it was is that he really believes and purports that everything that happens in the present is to do with something that happened in the past in childhood. And I come from that school of thought. Like, everything that happens in the present is connected to something that happened in childhood. And I'll give you an example. I was using an approach that Dr. Gabor is popularizing with somebody called Sat Dharan. And it's this approach called compassionate inquiry, as taught by Dr. Gabor Mate. And within 15 minutes, I was able to find out the cause of somebody who was terrified of flying. absolutely terrified of flying. And so, I kind of asked, okay, what happens when you fly? And they would say, well, they would hear, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. So for me, that alerts me to the fact, if you're hearing every time you buckle up in that plane, don't do it, don't do it. Who told you in your life sometime, don't do it, don't do it? When I ask the person this, they look at me quite strangely, and then their face changes, and it's like, oh my God, I haven't thought about this for years. And I say, well, tell me what's happened. And they said, well, they were a child and they were walking on a high wall, balancing on a high wall, and these big kids came to them, about 4 big kids, and started screaming in their face, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And the next thing, they were off the wall and they had these injuries. These kids had pushed them off the wall. So this is where they got the don't do it, don't do it. And if you imagine you're high up and you fall, so every time this person would get on a plane, being elevated or whatever, basically they were being activated, reactivated, and somewhere the body was just remembering this memory of don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And this is where they got the fear from flying. So this is what I love about this approach that Dr. Gabor is popularizing, that those of us who have addictions, it's an adaptation. It's an adaptation to circumstances that happened in our life. It was a way of protecting ourselves. And many people who have addictions had nobody to talk to when they experience some kind of trauma in their life. And what I want to say is that we all experience trauma. Okay, nobody gets away with not experiencing trauma. But the reality is that those people who have addictions would have trauma. Not everybody who has trauma has addictions. Yeah. But everybody who has addictions has trauma, has particular trauma. And it's a way of adapting to their environment. In terms of mindfulness, I have been practicing meditation for 25 years. And it transformed my life. When I walked into the rooms of meditation, I was diagnosed as a chronic extreme anorectic bulimic, and respite was recreational drugs and champagne. And that was my life. I had a high-powered job. I was then, working. I wasn't then. I did work as an international correspondent covering Aboriginal land rights and deaths in custody in Australia. But at that point, I was working in the gay world and was one of the producers of the lesbian and gay prides and Mardi Gras, and I would produce the arts festival. So I had a very high-powered job, but yet in my private life or my personal life, I was just dying with this eating disorder and recreational drug use and champagne. And that's what transformed my life. And I got into the field of recovery through my publishers who said, do you have another book? And I just really got to the point where people would always say, what was it? What was it that you survived? What was it that you actually managed to be here today? Because they knew my background. And I just got to a point, I needed to share my recovery. And that book, I think it was like my 6th book. I haven't been able to escape from it. All my other books, I'd write these books, and that was, it would be published, and you'd do the tour, and you would have the fanfare and the media coverage, and then you'd move on to the next book. But I have not been able to move away from this book. And now my life for the past 10 years has been working in the field of recovery.
That's so interesting. So I really liked something you said because it resonated. Here you are, you're in this high-powered position, you're living this amazing life. Everybody knows who you are on the public side, but on the inside, you're having all these internal conflicts and all this internal turmoil that nobody knows about on the outside. And you're medicating and you're binging and you're purging and you're doing all these things, You're restricting food because the outside has to have a certain look to it. And on the inside, you're falling apart. And that's so interesting because I work with so many executives and CEOs, and it's that exact same story. On the outside, they have to appear to have it together, because what if they come out and say, I have a problem? All of these people depend on them to lead. They depend on them to be in a position that they can follow, just like you. So my question is, as you're writing this book, what did you learn about yourself that made you go, aha? What was your aha moment when everything shifted?
That's a great question. My first response, just responding to what you said about working with executives, and of course now, because of the work done with Dr. Gabor Mate, it alerts me to the fact, where did you learn to be on show on the outside, but not show what's going on in the inside? And I know in my childhood, I grew up in a household. I grew up in orphanages, but we grew up in cottages. And my house parents, it was all about public show. You had to show your best, and you couldn't let people know what was going on behind closed doors. And that's where I learned it. I can remember when I started, it became apparent that I was inebriated. It was like, oh my God, I can't let people know that I'm inebriated, or I'm completely trashed, you know. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the reasons why I needed to start recovering, because it's like, I couldn't show that. And in terms of my aha moment, writing that book, and I co-wrote the book, which was great. I co-wrote it with Dr. Paramabandhu Groves, who was a psychiatrist and specialized in addictions for the National Health Service in England. And I do have this British accent, but I do live in North America. And when I was writing this, my aha moment was around relapse, because I was a chronic relapser, Carly. I was a chronic relapser. You know, letting go of the recreational drugs, and I loved them, and letting go of the champagne, that was easy. Really, that was easy. When I wanted to stop, I stopped. But letting go of the bulimia, oh my God, I was a chronic relapser. And I realized writing that book that what it was is that every time I was picking up, I was choosing the addiction. I was choosing the food over the recovery in that moment, because I wanted recovery. I wanted to stop. I really wanted to. But in that moment, I was choosing the addiction over my recovery. And that was a real aha moment, because I just couldn't understand. And I wanted to be able to write about relapse and for people to understand. It was the hardest section for me to write in the book, to really explore what was going on for me. And it was a real aha moment, because I gave myself such a hard time. And also realizing for me, especially around the eating disorder, for the alcohol and for the recreational drug use, it was abstinence. But actually for the eating disorder, it was harm reduction. Yeah. I would never have called it that, but actually it was harm reduction. That was the only way I could get onto the path of recovery. It was harm reduction. And so many years later, I now have abstinence from throwing up and purging, but it took a long while. It was harm reduction. Let me
ask you this question, because my drug of choice was food, first and foremost. My secondary was diet pills and speed and anything that sped up my metabolism so I could eat garbage and still lose weight. When you realized your eating problem was out of control, what did you use to fix that? Because I found recovery on a yoga mat and meditation. And when I tell people that, they say, well, you know, you should have gone to the 12 steps. And I say, I went to OA and I went to NA, but it didn't work, because OA Overeaters Anonymous had no food, no caffeine, and NA, Narcotics Anonymous, had all the sugar I wanted, all the caffeine I wanted, and all the Newport cigarettes I wanted, which I loved. So I had a struggle until I walked into a yoga class and I had a yoga and meditation teacher tell me, I got you, and I'm going to show you how to do this on a yoga mat with meditation. And when I tell my story, people say there's no way you could have stopped your eating disorder with those two things, but that's what did it. Therapy didn't work. 12 steps didn't work. My doctor telling me I was going to die from all the speed I was doing didn't really work. So how did you handle that piece of things? Because that's so hard, because you have to eat to live. You can't stop eating. What did you do?
It's a great question. I would say it was definitely walking into the rooms of meditation that did it. I would go on retreat and I would have abstinence. I had freedom. It was like I had I'd go on a weekend retreat and I'd have 2 days of not throwing up and of not binging. What was happening now, I know what was happening was that the meditation, and for you, the yoga, was calming the central nervous system. Because those of us who have addictions, our central nervous system is completely out of whack, which is why many of us are chronic relapsers, because we go into the rooms, but we don't have the meditation. Mm-hmm. We go into the rooms of 12 steps, but we don't have the meditation or the yoga to help calm the central nervous system, which is a really important piece. But I do also have to add that I did have specific therapy for the bulimia, and I had somebody holding the food, and then I had the therapy. And I can remember thinking, if this doesn't work, what if this doesn't work? What is going to work? And, I was having a week off, a week on. And when that ended, it was like, oh my God. And I remember I had a show because I was working in the theatre world, and I had a show. All the publicity was out, and, I was well known, and, it was already a box office sellout before even the show had opened. And it was like, how was I going to do this show? And I'd been in Italy. I'd been in Italy. I had a couple of lovers in Italy, and, I was still purging, and I realized, I can remember being in my bed and just thinking when I got back, I can't do this. And I heard a voice in my head saying, yes, you can. And it was like, how? You just need to stop binging. And I wanted something more than the food. And I really wanted it. And in doing that, I had to let go of the alcohol. I had to, because, as you say, we had to eat. And what I realized is that the alcohol was triggering off the binges because of the sugar. Uh-huh. So I had to then begin to find out what were my alcohols. And that was just something intuitively that I did. I realized that there were certain foods that I just couldn't stop. Like white bread. I had one piece of white bread. I couldn't stop. Like cookies. I couldn't stop. So, for me, there are certain foods that are my alcohols that I'm abstinent from. Because if I have them, I can't stop. It's just that they get in my system and I can't stop. So I don't have those certain foods in my diet. So basically, for that first year, I didn't show, it was a successful show. That first year, it was like I was in bliss heaven. And that second year, and for a while, I used to purge once a year. It was like, and then that was like that my harm reduction, that was dangerous. And I just realized, you know what, this is dangerous. So I don't purge once a year anymore. And I always know that I'm one bite away from having my head down the toilet. I know that if I started eating white bread and I started eating cookies and certain things that are my alcohols or my sugar, I would have my head down the toilet. But for me, it was the meditation, and it was the yoga. I was doing yoga as well. It was the meditation. It was the yoga. And I went into the rooms of 12 steps to OA, and forget it. Like, there was all these donuts everywhere, or caffeine, or, sugar, and, it just wasn't working for me. And also, I was terrified, I was terrified of obesity, I was terrified. It wasn't the right rooms for me to be in.
That's so interesting, because I had the exact same experience, and I haven't met anybody to this point, and that for me was 20 years ago. Nobody else has had that experience as me, and it's very interesting for me to hear that, because that's what happened to me. I walked in and I was like, wow, these are my addictions. They're here. I can have them as long as I don't do speed and diet pills, because this is okay. And then I would eat the sugar, and I would drink the caffeine with the sugar in it, and I would smoke the Newports, and I would go home and I would binge. And I would say, because I never purged, I was a binger, and then I would restrict for 2 days and go work out for 4 hours a day. So the behavior would exasperate itself, and it never seemed to go away. So when I walked into that yoga class and I met that teacher who was in recovery for alcohol, which I didn't know at first, it changed my life, because somebody said, you're using the meeting now as a platform to allow the binging, because it's okay there. And you're causing more damage than good. And that's when he put a yoga mat up, and he said, every time you want to binge, you're going to do 12 sun salutations. And I looked at him and I'm like, okay, that's not going to work. And he goes, you need to try it. So I did it. And every time I did it, I didn't want to eat. And I didn't want to throw up, and I didn't want to restrict, and I didn't want to, exercise for 4 hours. And I said, what's going on? And he said, you're calming your central nervous system. You're grounding yourself. You're getting centered. He goes, and those 12 sun salutations, because I was a beginner, took me 20 minutes. And he goes, in that 20 minutes time period, you're changing your thought process. And I went, aha. And that was my aha moment. So when I work with my clients, I make them all do yoga. They hate it in the beginning. I make them all do squats, and I make them all give up sugar and white flour. And a lot of people say to me, wow, you must have no clients. And I say, on the contrary, I have a ton of clients, because they like that method because it works, as opposed to go to a meeting every time you have a feeling and sit there and listen to other people complain. And I know that's a horrible way to put it, but that's the mentality. As opposed to, you have the tools to do this right here, right now. If you're having a feeling or a thought, calm yourself, because you're going to go to Target and you're going to be in the public and you're going to have these thoughts and feelings that are uncomfortable. And running to a meeting or, using that as your only method, you need to have the tools to be able to do this in the moment. So tell me about your book. Tell me how the book can work for people in the moment.
I mean, just ending that conversation, like OA, and I did go to OA when I moved to North America, and it was like, it's one of the programs which has the least recovery. Mm-hmm. And what is it? What is it about? And I know for me, I had to learn to get bigger in the world. Some people to recover have to learn to get smaller in the world. Getting smaller in the world can be terrifying for people, and getting bigger in the world can be terrifying for people as well. And I mean, our stories are just so similar, because I was a coke head. Coke, speed, graduated to coke, anything that was going to make it go faster. And, in coming to the book, the book it's another way in. There are so many different approaches. And the thing is that there are many of us who are just looking. And at some point we need to act. We need to really act and, do something about our recovery. And that's really hard. And I think we need help. Like, the book that I've written is great, but we need to ask for help. That's part of the disease, is the isolation. You ask for help going to that yoga studio. I ask for help going to that meditation studio. So I'd really say, if you choose to buy one of my books, go to a yoga studio, go to a meditation studio, or go to therapy, or even go to the rooms of 12 steps, or somewhere where you're going to get that help. But what my book does is really, it basically looks at this whole stinking thinking. Because for me, Carly, in that bed, I can remember waking up and thinking, oh my God, my biggest addiction is my stinking thinking. And I was horrified, because that's what I was addicted to. And that was actually causing me to turn to the food or to whatever, that I just wasn't able to stay with what was going on in my head. Just all this negative self-talk, all this mantra which was telling me, I hate myself, I hate myself. And I would do it 10 to the dozen. I hate myself, I hate myself, I hate myself. I can't even do it as quick as what used to go whirring around my head. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my God, living with that. And I know, actually, for me, if we have eating disorders, there's a trauma. There's a trauma. And there's a very high correlation between those of us who have eating disorders and sexual abuse. Very, very, very high correlation. And I know for me, that binging and purging, when I started getting recovery, I was that young child going upstairs who was having to suck off one of the older boys' penises. And so for me, I was purging out the filth. Every time I was going into that shop and ordering all these cakes and everything, I was that young kid going in, and then I was purging the filth out. Yeah. So that with eating disorders, I don't know. I think what's happened in this conversation, I feel really inspired, and I think, wow, we've come together for a reason. And I would just love to talk about putting something together specifically for eating disorders. I've been asked, when are you going to write that book specific to eating disorders? When are you going to do that program specific to eating disorders? And I'm getting to that place, and maybe it's because I've been looking for the person to do it with, and maybe that person has just appeared in my life. Carly.
Wow, that's so interesting, and I'm going to tell you why. I put the book out, I Married a Junkie, which is about my husband using heroin while I'm helping people get off heroin. And I have another book coming out, which is about law of attraction. But I have this one book I'm sitting on, and I haven't done it. And it's all about where my eating disorder came from. And it's all about the abuse I suffered as a child. And I haven't put it out for the exact same reason, because I'm looking for someone to collaborate with, and I think it's a great idea, and I'm really glad I met you, because I think there's a lot around the guilt, the shame, the remorse as women, that we come out and we say, I had to do these sexual things, or I had to act in a certain manner to get through something, and then I turned to food because it was acceptable, and I turned to food because it was legal, and I turned to food because why not? Everybody eats cake. What's the problem? I have a part in my book where I talk about my turning point was I was in college, and I was sitting on the floor eating cake with my hands, a whole cake, not a piece of cake, the whole cake. And there was cake on the wall, there was cake on me, there was cake on the dog, and no one was home. So it was okay. And in walked my roommate, and she went, wow. And I went, what? And she said, there's something wrong with you. And I'm thinking to myself, why is there something wrong with me? Cake's legal and everybody eats cake. What's the problem? And I started getting ready to bring forth all of this stuff that I went through, because it's a lot. And I think it's a great idea to team up as women to do that, because we're not supposed to talk about this stuff. Going upstairs, sucking on a boy's penis is not the things we don't talk about. We don't talk about that. Or in my case, my father used to put a gun to my head and play Russian roulette. We don't talk about that. Because if we talk about that, it makes us as professionals look like we are damaged. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And I think that's what propels us to help other people, is being in that moment going, I've been there. And it's so powerful to come forward that way.
We have to do it, because I watched Leaving Neverland, and watching that, it tells those young men who told their stories, they were telling other people's stories. And that's what's so powerful.
Yeah.
And this thing with eating disorders, it's so, oh God, it's just everywhere. It's just, I would have been the obese one, but I just threw it up,
Mm-hmm.
And then it's the recovery of just knowing that for some women, I've seen it with friends, they've had the surgery and they've got smaller and they can't cope, like being smaller in the world, because the world starts looking at them differently.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we know the world starts looking at you differently when you're bigger in the world as well. And it's the same thing. I would go to somebody's house and then eat all the food and then smash something and say it had broken.
Yeah.
I sometimes I just think, gosh, if I ever become a millionaire, I would want to open up I don't like calling it a rehab, but a recovery house for people with eating disorders. It's something that definitely I feel like I have to be of service somehow, and maybe this is the beginning of it, really.
Wow. And to your point, I understand both sides, because I was the big girl, because I didn't purge. So when I was overweight, I was told, don't wear that, you're too fat, cover up, you're too big. And then I got small, and then I was told, don't wear that, you're showing off your body. So I had that conflicting message. So it was the exact same thing. I'm too big for the world. No one likes me as the fat girl. Okay, I'll be the thin girl, and then I get chastised for the thin girl. So it was like, where am I supposed to be? Because I'm not accepted fat, I'm not accepted thin. Where am I supposed to be? And then finally, I just came up with the idea that I don't give a fuck what people think, and I'm just going to be me. And when I did that, it was the most freeing thing I've ever done, because people would say, well, I don't like your shoes. Okay, well, thank you for your opinion. I'm not going to take any weight to it, but thank you for your opinion. And I started to find out who I really was. And that process took forever. So I love the idea of helping women that have the body issues and the self-esteem issues, that are stuffing and they're running and they're not addressing the trauma and they're not addressing the childhood. I mean, our childhoods were very different, but similar in a sense that we had to learn a coping mechanism to deal with an abuseful situation. And our coping mechanism was, I'm going to do the activity I'm told to do, but I'm going to eat, and then I'm going to search for other drugs that make me feel good to escape the feeling that I have, instead of addressing the feeling that I have. Because I'm in a situation as a child, we were both in situations where you can't control that. You have no control because you are a child. And then when you become an adult, you identify with all those feelings you had as a child because they reoccur in life. And as they reoccur, your coping mechanism is, I'm going to eat, or I'm going to do cocaine, or I'm going to do speed, or I'm going to do whatever because I don't like this feeling. And that is so not talked about in addiction. Food addiction is so not talked about because it's like, well, everybody overeats.
Yeah, well, everybody drinks as well. Most people drink, but it's a matter of life and death, the food addiction. It definitely, I mean, my teeth, all my teeth at the front are capped because of the acid of the teeth crumbling, the damage I did to the throat. And there was at one point where Carly, I had food lodged in my throat and I'm jumping up and down by the toilet. I can't breathe and I'm trying to dislodge it and I'm jumping up and down. I don't know how long for, and then it dislodges. I collapse. And what am I doing 30 minutes later? Back up.
Yeah.
Binging and purging again. It's, yeah.
Yeah. That's the cycle.
Mm-hmm. So in a way, you know, coming back to how can my work, really open the door for people in recovery. Definitely the book, The 8-Step Recovery is one approach. And then I have the Mindfulness-Based Addiction Recovery, which is a more secular approach. And that really breaks down the vicious cycle, you know, looking at how we as people with addictions, with obsessive behaviors, how we get onto that vicious cycle and we can't get off that vicious cycle, and really teaching people about feeling, teaching people to come home to the body, because most people are not at home. They left their body in childhood. Nobody's home. They switched all the lights off. They switched all the feelings off, because that was the way to protect themselves. And we have to learn to come home to the body. And that's really scary. And so what both my book does and the Mindfulness-Based Addiction Recovery Program is actually getting people to come home to the body, and it's safe to be in the body. And that, you know, some people may be listening thinking, oh no, because it's all about getting high, having altered states, escaping from the body. But actually, it's about bringing people back to the body, back to the breath, in touch with feeling. Because often what's happening is we're in the head, and it's the head that gets us into trouble. You know, we're listening to those facilitated thoughts. I deserve a drink. You know, it's been a really hard day. I can't do it. And all those facilitated thoughts make us pick up, which destroy the harm reduction program, which sabotage the abstinence as well. And I talk about harm reduction and abstinence because for some people it's abstinence, for some people it's harm reduction. We have to be take total agency of what we want our recovery to look like.
Wow, that's so powerful. And I'm so glad you came on the show. I'm going to have all the links and everything put up on the site so that people can access you and access your books and access the training and everything that you're offering, because I think it's a great way to offer something besides what we have. And it makes so much sense because we're avoiding coming into ourselves and dealing with those issues on a root level. So thank you so much for coming on the show. And if you have any takeaways for our audience or any advice you would give somebody listening?
Yeah, just keep on shopping around until you find something that works for you. No program is a panacea, and it may be that you do a hodgepodge. Don't let anybody say to you, if you're in a 12-step program, you have to let go of Buddhist recovery. And don't let, if you're in Buddhist recovery, somebody say to you, you have to let go of going to 12 steps. Don't. It's your program. And you know, if you keep on working it, it's going to work. If you keep on picking yourself up, it really will work. I know that because I had to keep on picking myself up from the floor, and I just thought nothing was happening. And then the biggest thing is just be kind to yourself. If you have a slip, just say, you know what, I was hurting and I need a hug. That's all. And I can do something different in the next moment. Just know that every moment you can do something different, and each moment will impact the next moment. So what if you picked up the alcohol in one moment? You know what? If you pick it up, you can put it back down in the next moment, you know? So, because sometimes we pick it up and think, oh shit, but actually in that shit, there's the gap. You can put it back down again. And even if you do drink it, the next moment you can do something different. It doesn't have to be an excuse. Oh, I'm going to go on a bender, so now I'm just going to drink everything which is there. you can do something different in the next moment. Take that power. The power is in the next moment, and you can do something different.
Wow, that is so powerful. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Carly. Thank you.
Everybody, you've been listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes, the Addictions Coach, the Addictions Academy, and my guest today, Dr. Valerie Mason-John. Have a great day, guys. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the show today. Head on over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a comment or review of what you think. Or contact us at 1-800-706-0318. If you want to be on our show, feel free to email or call. And if you have a topic, feel free to email or call as well.
Thanks for listening to Unpause Your Life. For show notes and more, head on over to unpauseyourlife.com.
Big shout out to recoveryinnovators.com for help producing this show. Thank you, guys.
I took a walk down the long road where they said that I shouldn't go. On my way found a reason to wake up another day. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do. Find faith or religion, but nothing to show for it. No need to escape in love with my pain. I may be weak, but I'm alive, still alive, and I won't be bound by your mistake. No, I won't be your enemy, trapped at the gate. Bring me to life, put me to death. Just give me something that's just not so hard to believe. To believe. To believe. I took a walk down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go. I knew the dangers of